It's now my great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Martina Voser. Impact has many resonances. It is related to influence, but impact is also about raw force, to hit against something, to attack something. For instance, a landslide, an avalanche is a very strong, powerful, disastrous kind of impact. And we thought it would be important to have an expert on this issue here. Martina is also, she is speaking about regions. You grew up in Chur, and we traveled together to E.A.T. You know every stone. Yeah. No. The landscape, everything comes to life when you travel here because you're so embedded and engaged with this area that it's great to have you here. You're a landscape architect, and you founded in 2004 your practice, where you're now co-director and partner, which is called MAFO, Martina Voser Architecture, in Zurich. And since last year, we're colleagues at E.T Zurich at the Architecture School. It's a great pleasure that we can collaborate also on that level. Became known through the park Attisholz near Solothurn, which is a mixture of industrial natural landscape along the Aare. And now you're going to talk about your most recent project about Bondo, very near for here. We're looking forward to your presentation. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Philip, for your introduction. Thank you for having me. It's really a privilege to be among all you. Thank you for being here and not outside in taking some sun. So reflecting on form and impact, being a landscape architect is all our work. It's always about impact. So when we start to shape space, we start to initiate processes for ecology or society. So having a slope is about wetness, about how you influence the soil, which vegetation can grow, which other cohabitants of our world are then installing themselves, like birds, insects, other animals and plants. And it's always also about connecting spaces, relations. When we talk in landscape about scale, so maybe we create borders as hatches to divide two spaces, but these hatches then suddenly are spaces where other species live in. So it's a big issue. We work as landscape architects is always the action we do, what reaction do we create? So I want to take you on a journey not so far from here to the Bregaglia, which is a valley going west. It's the valley where all the Giacomettis grew up. Very vertical. It's quite the opposite of what we have seen before, where Rick grew up. It's when you look, it's quite interesting because when you look, I do something very illegal today. I'm using a laser pointer. I know it's not legal anymore. But I think walking on scale, so you think it's a connection somehow from the Engadin to the Bregaglia, but when you look very closely, it's on a very large scale divided. Because not far from here, above Maloja, we have this one point where the raindrop either goes to the Black Sea or goes to the Mediterranean or goes to the North Sea. So this little spot here, it's really on a very large scale, a very dividing moment. So the shape of the orography of the mountain is quite influencing in a very large scale the hydrological system. So the Bregaglia, it's where the Maira flows towards then the Po River, the Po Valley, and it's from a geological point of view super interesting because it's the result of a very old process. It's a backwards erosion of the Maira. That means that the water takes away the earth, and like that, this huge gap between Maloja and the Bregalia has been created. So again, here, ecological, geological processes are shaping forms that are also today divisions of languages, divisions of cultures. But it has always been a place of transition. The Romans went through, so the Romans had the route coming from the Bregalia, so it was about the Septimer, the Julier, the Maloja, and we are just down here. So this in the maps, in the old maps, they were just talking about the form of water and mountain, but these places have already been signed. And why this is important, it has always been a transit route that created incredible cultural acts by humans with beautiful streets built in. But what is also amazing in the Bregalia, you found Renaissance gardens in this really vertical and really dynamic world. As you have seen in the painting of Giacometti already, but you see it in the horography, we are in a highly dynamic landscape where the melting mountains, the material is coming down always, so it is a dynamic landscape. Sometimes we as human, we forget it, we love to have it maybe a bit more static, but the Bregalia, it's all about stones. Even in this picture of Alberto Giacometti, when he draws Il Paesaggio, it's about the forest, the protected forest, and the stones that the forest is keeping from falling down faster. Still today, this multi-layered of the landscape is very strong. So these layers of geology, of geological processes, of vegetation that is Stalin himself, very old vegetation, cultural vegetation like the Selve. It's the most important or the biggest cultural chestnut forest of Europe. And very young vegetation with the succession process that grew on these dynamic landscapes, but then also the layers of cultural history, of infrastructure lanes that bring the electricity from the Bregalia to Zurich. So it's really a palimpsest of many different strata of the territory. Bondo, the topic of Bondo, we are here, it's like the intersection between the Maira, so the main valley, and the Bondasca valley, where in the back, up here, you see this Cengalo and Bondo, Promontonio, Spino. This is like a fluvial plain. It was a fluvial plain where the villages in ancient time just were seated up in the corners. Then in 2017, 3 million cubic meters of material come down from the Cengalo. You see it here, and just to give you maybe a bit an impression, Remo Meyer, who lives in Solio, as an accident, took these two photos. The time difference between the first photo where the material started to slide down and then it was down in the valley is 5 minutes. So that gives you maybe a bit of sense of the dynamic and the velocity and the drama that was there. Drama, but maybe on one point of view, but at the end it's just a very normal natural process. So for the nature, maybe it's not so much a drama as that it is for us. The thing is that the Cengalo will still continue to move, and this material is now very loose. So you have like a huge amount of a gravel bed lying in the back. In 2017, when this material were rolling down from this natural scale, the problem, the drama was when it hit the very small scale of the village. So it influenced the main, it's one of, they call it the arteria of the Engadina, because all the people that work in hotelry, they live in Chiavenna. So there underneath these stones would be the cantonal road. Some houses from the 80s where maybe spatial planning decided to build houses, to allow building houses where it's not so clever, were affected. The bridges have gone away, so it was really a huge disaster. Unfortunately, also some people that were hiking in the mountains died. So then this, I talked about this loose material, which you see a bit, you saw the picture before, it's here, but all back there. So the Bondaska Valley, that was a green valley, today it's just a gravel bed. And every time there is a weather storm coming, so people are afraid, or we are afraid, that the material will be swapped again towards Bondo. The problem is this material is like quite huge. So these stones are 3 tons and higher. So it's a question of scale interaction between a scale. It's definitely not a human scale anymore. It's really a natural scale of a big scale. So they did very urgently, because of this being afraid of this to happen. So they built it very quickly, dams, protection dams. But this was just a provisory solution. So the canton of Graubünden, not Zurich, Graubünden, decided a project of protection. And this project of protection included 2 very high dikes, a new cantonal road that is on certain points 5 meters higher than today, so that the water and the material can flow over, a new bridge, a new roundabout, and a new bridge punt on top of there. When the canton developed this project, then the community of Bregalia, especially Bondo, they realized the risk that if they do it as they do it normally, maybe then it looks like the pictures you saw before, because Bondo is really incredible. Bondo, Promontorio, all this region has a very high value, cultural value, historical value, very fine, small scaled. So the question is how to embed this infrastructure that needs to take this amount of energy into this very subtle, very fine structure of the grotti, which also all these layers of vegetation that also had grown. So they made a competition, which is very rare in Switzerland. Normally, these projects of protection are just done by engineers and maybe sometimes landscape architects, and architects can come to make something a little bit nicer. But this time, the idea was really to do a competition, having landscape architects, engineer for bridges, engineer for streets, hydrological engineers, and architects together in one team since the beginning. So you see, we were together with Concet Bronzini, Eichenberger Revital, who were the hydrologs, Konrad Inkler-Woth, and Rita Ilian. Our proposition, so we didn't change we were not allowed to change the strategy, the hydrological strategy. So we worked on the shapes of bridges and dikes. This was our main topic. So I will talk about the bridge punt, how we now do the dikes, the materialization, the bus. There will be a new bus station. We tried to get influenced a lot by the culture of the valley, because they have already a culture of how to deal with disaster. So, like you see in this bridge of Gastelmoor, 27 in the 50s, they had many times that the bridge was taken away, but they continued it. They continued to knit how it was to read it. So we get inspired by these types of open spaces, the types of the gardens, the selve, the groves, this culture of terraces, garden terraces, the culture of walls, different types of walls, from concrete to natural stone walls. And we decided, or we proposed, to break the scale of these huge dams that are up to 5 meters higher by introducing terraces along the dike. So an element of the garden as an element, like people can interact with this new infrastructure and starting to make it their own, instead of installing the wound as something that is just taking them away, transforming this dam into something they can suddenly start to take care out of it. And the punt, the bridge punt, was also very difficult because of all these heights topics, and so you need to have this HAKU 300, so you need to have a certain height, but you don't want that people need to go too high over it. So your concept came with this fantastic idea of, inspired by the arch bridges that are very typical in the valley, just to make it, to lie it down. So instead that people need to go up there, so they just make an arch on the horizontal like that. We could keep the height for the water, and for the people it's like really a nice promenade with a belvedere to just walk over. And for the modulation of this dike, it was really having the scale of the nature on the one side, installing a promenade on top of it, and then on the they call it air side, the hydrologs, to really start to modulate it like a plissé with very small scale, just 1 meter high terraces that can be cultivated. We studied a lot the materiality, because also on this very fine scale, the form has an impact. Also, natural stone has an impact of new habitats that are creating. But not only, it's also about patina that can be grown, but also about how you get in dialogue with the existing. These were what the canton, these are the norms of the canton. So that's how the walls should have looked if we just used the norms of the canton. And we were really not happy about them for many, many reasons. One reason was just, I don't have to explain, but the second reason is also from an ecological point of view, because if you start to cut stones, then you need, I mean, you need so much energy and so much water to just cutting stones, and we have kilometers of stone walls in our concept. On the other side, we felt it like really weird to go inside the mountain to take out material, while on the other hand, the Jengalo just sent us all this material. So we were really highly fighting for our strategy. Then we realized that the one side of the valley, Solio, is quartzite. So quartzite makes very rectangular stones. And we were on the granite, Jengalo is granite, so the stones are much rounder. So we needed to find very old constructors that explained us how we can do the walls with this material of the Jengalo, and without using the saw, but just cracking the stone. And then finally we were able to find our way. We were able to make these test walls. So just it's really like the material from the Jengalo just cracked on site. But that needed a lot of space, so that had an impact again on the landscape, our decision. We couldn't do it down in the valley, obviously, down in the bassin of the river, because of the danger. So we decided we need to have it somewhere else, the triage of the stones. And we had just these two guys. They were for weeks just cutting stones. So, but at the end, it's really this dialogue that we were searching for, a dialogue between the old and the new, a very smoothing in, so trying to, it's readable, it is differently made. We have also certain walls that are not only natural stone wall or dry stone walls because of the statics, but it's even there, it was to find a dialogue to calling down, and not to have this disaster that has been there, always shouting and showing there that it has been there. So the scale issue was a huge challenge for us, because the construction side, it's in a scale that I have never worked at. The caterpillar are huge. One stone, the smallest stone that they use for the hydrological reason, is 3 tons. And they just started somewhere. So you suddenly had pieces of wall somewhere, while we are working normally very context size. We try to really embed it and find the smooth connections. And another challenge was the form of our organization of the team, because we had many different cultures of how we do projects. We always got these plans, you know, the traffic engineer, the perfect curve for the car, the as a bridge engineer, the perfect curve for the forces, or the hydrological engineer, the perfect width of the riverbed and the stone walls. Always detached from the context. So our role was always about embedding the things in the context and bringing things together. You know, like it's quite good if a bridge meets then the street by the quote and you don't have 50 centimeters of difference. And for example, the hydrological engineer, they do the plans or as the section that you did, maybe every 100 meters, and then the plans in 1 to 1,000. Sometimes in between you have houses. So it's about when they do it out in the mountain, it's okay, but when you do it in the village, you infect quite a lot on identity, on people, home. So our role was really about how always marrying these two worlds together and trying to find solutions. So it was also, we started planning during COVID, which was quite a challenge. So we had always to take call, to call and to find strategy how to deal with that. And then it was again the question about what is then the strategy without just making something nice, but also again installing always structures that can again provide or initiate new lives of new forms of being. So we came also in Spino, where we didn't have the wideness for the terraces of the dikes, but we came again with these terraces of gardening, also to break the height of the wall. And this strata of old and new and future. So we when it came to form and detailing, we also had to learn to let go and to really be very precise about which are the details, where are the points we really go to, and where do we just let it go. And so we learned new ways also of planning. We learned from the engineers, and we just defined it was about hierarchizing a lot what is important and what not. But for example, for us, it was always important where the human beings are there. We changed the scale. So we started to install bordure, like the last stone is finer. We started to transform or accentuate moments along the dike as really as belvedere to find this relation, to start to talk, to have the view in this wild nature. And to also allow this infrastructure to be more than a protecting infrastructure, but to have new relations, to have new views in a very traditional landscape way, le vedute, but also to install new paths, new connections for tourists, but also for the people in the village. And what is really also super nice, these places, they have a culture of fountains, which they care a lot. And we also installed a very tiny little fountain somewhere. And the first day the fountain was installed, people came and brought the flowers and welcomed this new place. So we were obviously able to somehow make this giving the hand, so they could take the places to make them part of their everyday lives. And especially the moment of the terraces, the garden terraces, for us was a very touching moment, because we had this idea since the beginning. It would be nice if people then take them and start to use them as gardens, but they were really immediately taking over. So already last summer, the construction site is not over yet, but in this part they started to have their salads, and it's fantastic from the climate point of view. So we will have kiwi there, we will have figs there. So it's taking over. It's like it's a structure that could be or should be really fixed and protecting, but at the other hand, it allows new life, and it allows to continue to live without just this freezing of the disaster. So somehow also marrying the past and the future. So remembering the disaster or remembering these huge dynamics, but allowing in future not to see it as something negative, but to something positive. So maybe from some point of view, reflecting on Bondo, it is, maybe we can come back to this old sublime topic of how we look at nature, of being somewhere far away, not to go too close, and watching it. So this can maybe be also looked quite critical too. While I think we should in future maybe think to be more or have a different attitude, because in Switzerland we are really very much trying to control all these natural forces, and now we're starting to realize that maybe we can't control them so much anymore. So the strategy for the future maybe should be more, instead of controlling natural forces, guiding natural forces. So again, form and impact, super interesting, because by guiding them, I'm convinced we can install also new forms of nature and new relations to water, especially with this topic that we all know with the climate change. So all this material will come much more often down, while on the other hand, we have the droughts. So I like to think a lot about this habitat that we know from ecology, which is the littoral. The littoral is this zone between land and water, of water bodies. It's from the biological view, highly dynamic, highly productive, with many biodiversities that live there, and it's always shifting. It's always it's all about relations. No, sometimes it's there, but then it's coming back. You get in dialogue with other species. So I think it can be translated in many ways, in social ways, but especially in the way how we maybe in future should rethink our relation towards water and towards natural processes. So I see maybe Bondo for me personally a bit as an example of a very a big littoral, a littoral that puts in dialogue the huge natural scale of very long-term, long-time geological processes with everyday life, with generation children that grow up with that. It's also somehow a littoral that brings in this moment of a social impact, like in the sense like people go there, they start to care for the gardens, they start to talk about how you grow salad, because we don't have humus, so it's really a challenge to garden there. So they have to create by plantation, they have to create the humus, so they start to exchange how to do it. So it's also this moment, but it's somehow also for me an example how in future we should think infrastructures more, because at the moment infrastructure are much about perfect protection, perfect streets, perfect providing of resources. But I'm really convinced that identity, culture, poetry are as important for us too. So infrastructure that provides society for the well-being should in future be much more thought together with these impacts, and not only for one monofunctional use. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation, Martina. We have not so much time, 5 minutes, so I will not use the 5 minutes for my own questions, although I prepared some, and I was even assisted by Olga Popova from ZHDK, who formulated many questions. So all these questions will remain here, sealed for you later. And we will start asking from the floor, as one says. Bitte.
Driving. Danke vielmals. Thank you so much. Driving every week from Maloja to Lugano, I've been observing and admiring your amazing work, for many years. Obviously, I always ask myself, how are they really going to have this functioning dialogue and agreement with the landscape architects, the aesthetics, engineering, and architecture? And thank you so much. You gave me all these insights. With the mayor of Bregaglia being an architect, was there actually a mediator who made this possible? I mean, this project looks very sustainable to me. You said that sometimes you had to give in on your own ideas. How did this work? Was there somebody helping you in this engagement, or did you do it on your own?
I mean, we were a team. We are a huge team, and we are all divas. All that is, we really have to say. So we have quite hard meetings sometimes. But what is the great thing in all these divas? We all don't think for us. We think for the place. So so that I think it's the main thing. So we take ourselves serious but not too serious, and so in that sense it was able. And what is also the thing, I mean, there is an urgency, which also an urgency in time. So we had to always find solutions, and we had to decide. And I mean, the money topic is a huge topic. It's not, it costs something. So sometimes also that were just taken decisions by them. So, but it was a challenge, not only on our side of the team, but also on the other side between the Comune and the Cantone. So we are, I think we are, now we start to have time to reflect on the form of the organization, which is always very important in this kind of project. Yeah.
All clear. So I'll ask my one question before you're gonna be released to the coffee break,
Yes.
which of course everybody's waiting for. But we have to make it not too easy for you, no? Regulate the forces, but not control them. How you have? This is an incredible brief and challenge. What is your first step when you get such an opportunity to deal with a landslide? How did you first start?
Dignity somehow. It was really like yeah, a challenge, like to, I mean, somehow I really wanted to do this project because I'm so convinced these are the challenges of the future, and we have to go in there and to resolve them. And at the other side, it's like I didn't know anything. So I really needed the specialist. I needed the team, the ecologist and the hydrologist to learn more. So just asking questions and going on and trying to find the right questions. So our method is maybe not so much about at the beginning finding solutions, but trying to find out which are the real questions that we have to answer. So because at the beginning you have to feel like it's really a mountain there, and then we a lot of dialogue with them. So, but it's also super interesting because you really we start to get in a dialogue with these processes. So that means sometimes as a designer you're also afraid of having a wrong form, no? of in spaces. Like I really liked a lot with Rick what he was talking about, the quality of spaces and what you then allow by the quality of a space that can happen in there. So the stress is quite high, no? In public space, when you do public spaces. So so when you start to realize, when you embrace these processes instead of fighting them, so they can also help you, that it's not only about you to make the decisions, but it's also about the nature to make the decisions. So I think that is something also that gives me some freedom in the design process.
Thank you. No, I admire the optimism of landscape architecture and the idea, yeah, the mountain brought us the stones. We don't have to gather them. With this optimism, we would go to the break and gather again in about 20 minutes. Thank you, Martina Voser.